Yeah, so a very warm welcome on behalf of AIMA, an International Association of Agricultural Museums, and the Slovene Ethnographic Museum in Ljubljana, here in Slovenia. We host the event on the World Bee Day. My name is Barbara Sosic, and I'm a curator of the Rural Economy collections, which also include beekeeping. This is the second time I lectured this month on May 8th, which was the World Donkey Day. We heard a lot about the importance of donkeys in agriculture and transport around the world. And today is the World Bee Day, and I wish you a very happy Bee Day. It is widely known that Slovenes have a love for bees in their genes. And this tends to be true for all Slavic nations, as they are known to have a rich apicultural tradition. So it's no wonder Slovenia proposed that the United Nations proclaim May 20th as a World Bee Day. Bees are some of the most important pollinators. There are many. Today I've heard that there are 5,000 pollinators in the world, and that we must be aware of their importance in ensuring food security. And also not just food security, also sustainable agriculture and biodiversity. In a long term, the protection of bees and the beekeeping sector can help reduce poverty and hunger, as well as preserve a healthy environment in which we all deserve to live. So our meeting today will be around 1.5 hours long. We shall hear about sustainable beekeeping in climate and environmental changes, about how Slovenia promotes its expertise in beekeeping knowledge at home and abroad, about the ancient tradition of tree beekeeping culture, which Poland, together with Belarus, inscribed in 2020 on the representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity. And for the end, we shall hear some interesting facts and analytical arguments about the importance of the beekeeping for agriculture, at least in Europe. After these presentations, there will be time for your questions and answer, or some exchange of opinions or experiences. So if you have some questions during presentations, please write them in the chat and we will try to answer them with our speakers. I think they are all with us. No, Michael will come a little bit later. Slovene Ethnographic Museum is a coordinator of the safeguarding of the intangible cultural heritage. And last year in 2021, together with the Ministry of Culture and many other partners, we proposed the nomination of the Intangible Heritage Unit of Beekeeping in Slovenia for inscription on UNESCO's representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity. So I wanted to start our meeting with a 10-minute film, which is taken from the list of files being treated by the end of this year. So now we see this film, you will see what kind of beekeeping, in which way we beekeep here in Slovenia.
The love for bees and beekeeping is deeply ingrained in Slovenia. Here at the juncture of the Alpine and Mediterranean worlds, man has lived in symbiosis with bees for centuries, nurturing their good qualities and adapting beekeeping knowledge and techniques to the natural environment. Mild winters and summers, sufficient sunshine and rainfall, forests and meadows with their varied pastures provide superb conditions for beekeeping. Slovenian beekeepers were so successful in establishing the Carniolan honeybee, Apis mellifera carnica, that it is now the world's second most prevalent subspecies. They designed their own characteristic type of bee dwellings in hives and apiaries to protect the bees from the cold and rainfall. By transporting the bees to the vicinity of their sources of pasture, they further improved the efficiency of use of natural resources. Numerous beekeepers shared their knowledge directly and through expert publications, and expressed their spiritual depth through folk, literary and visual arts. Beekeepers sourced their knowledge from tradition and passed down their empathy towards bees, their love for them and mutual collaboration to their successors by example.
Čebelariti sem pričel leta 2013, takoj potem, ko sem se z Ljubljane vrnil nazaj v rodno Lokvico pri Metliki. Zanimanje v meni je buril čebeljak na našem dvorišču, ki je bil last mojega pradeda. Znanje sem pridobival z branjem knjig, z izobraževanjem, z obiskovanjem predavanj, s pogovori z okoliškimi čebelarji, ki so radi tudi svetovali, predvsem pa na lastnih izkušnjah in napakah. V letu 2014 sem postavil čebeljak, notri pa postavil ažji panjski sistem, troetažne panje. Čebelarim z krajinsko sivko ali kranico, to je Apis mellifera carnica. Čebeljak sem umestil v okolje z zelo raznolikimi pašami. Pridelujem v glavnem med, ki je vključen v višjo shemo kakovosti, evropsko prepoznano, slovenski med z zaščiteno geografsko označbo.
Zdaj pa akcija, pripravimo se, oblečemo se, poberemo orodja in gremo k čebeljaki. Z delom v varstveno-delovnem centru smo pričeli že v letu 2012. Takrat nismo imeli nobenih zgledov ne doma, kot tudi ne v svetu. Varovanci so invalidne osebe, ki imajo duševne in motorične motnje. Delo s čebelami jih združuje, povezujejo se z lokalnimi čebelarji, sadjarji in lokalnimi skupnostmi. Za njih je to preko čebelarskega krožka delovna terapija, ki prerašča v apiterapijo in je družbeno koristna za vse varovance.
Rišemo slike, voščilnice, štikamo, vezemo. Motivi so naprimer čebela ali pa slike so pa čebela kot na cvetlicah.
S čebelarskim izobraževanjem začnemo že v osnovni šoli s krožkarji in tudi nekaj izbirnimi predmeti. Kasneje v srednjih šolah imajo ravno tako izbiren predmet čebelarstvo. Podobno pa imamo rešeno tudi na univerzi, ker imamo izbirne predmete z področja čebelarstva. Seveda, poleg teh poklicno usposobljenih čebelarjev pa se izobrazi tudi različni strokovnjaki, tudi na akademskem nivoju, ki potem delujejo tako v čebelarstvu, kot tudi na drugih področjih.
Da bi mi čim bolj približali čebelarstvo vsem skupinam, zato mi začenjamo s popularizacijo čebelarstva že od otroških vrtcev, preko osnovnih šol do tečajev za čebelarje, začetnike in tako naprej.
Pri čebelarskem krožku mi je najbolj všeč, ko gremo k čebelnjaku in opazujemo čebele.
Čebelar bi želel postati, da bi ohranil čebele in biotsko pestrost, saj čebele več ne morejo preživeti brez čebelarjev.
Čebele človeku nudijo poseben mir. Iz njihovega življenja se lahko marsikaj naučimo in nam predstavljajo poseben navdih. Do čebel čutim izjemno strast. Ne bi mogel več brez njih, če tudi bi bila leta brez dobrih paš. V prihodnje načrtujem dobro skrb za svoje čebele in pa predvsem za prenos znanja na svoje potomce in ostale mlade čebelarje.
Čebelarka je postala rada zato, ker imam rada naravo in narava in čebela se povezujeta.
Urbano čebelarjenje pomeni ukvarjanje s čebelami v zgoščenem mestnem okolju. Pri nas je ta dejavnost razširjena nekako zadnjih 10 let, čeprav najdemo posameznike, ki so se s tem ukvarjali že tudi v prejšnjih generacijah. Dejavnost morda zveni presenetljivo, vendar pa se mesta odlikujejo z veliko biotsko pestrostjo, kar pomeni, da imajo čebele bogato prehrano od zgodnje pomladi do pozne jeseni. Po nekaterih kazalnikih je Ljubljana prestolnica z najvišjim številom čebel na kvadratni meter.
Slovenija je dežela odličnih čebelarjev. Več kot 10 tisoč nas je. Povezani smo v več kot 200 čebelarskih društev. Vsa društva so povezana v območje oziroma regionalne čebelarske zveze. Vsi skupaj pa tvorimo odlično čebelarsko organizacijo, Čebelarsko zvezo Slovenije.
Mi imamo čebele. Moj ata je čebelar, moj ati je čebelar, jaz pa rajš risam na panjske kotnice, da so panji lepši.
Uspeh čebelarjev in kakovost izdelka sta odvisna od številnih nepredvidljivih dejavnikov, zato je poleg praktičnih izkušenj ključno izobraževanje čebelarjev. Pri čebelah potrebuješ zelo veliko znanja, če hočeš biti čebelar, moraš biti deloven, resen ter pripravljen na napake, ki jih nato popravljaš z izobraževanjem. Sam sem čebelar že več kot 30 let in izobražujem mlajše in starejše od sebe, a še vedno redno hodim na predavanja svojih kolegov. Saj še zdaleč ne vem vsega.
Naša čebelarska tradicija sega že v leto 1982. S čebelarstvom se je začel ukvarjati moj tast, iz prvih litrov pridelanega medu je tašča začela ustvarjati medene dobrote. Smo eno redkih čebelarstev, ki ohranja tudi lectarstvo. Vso njuno znanje in predanost k delu sta tast in tašča prenesla na naju in najine otroke. Z možem sva obstoječe čebelarstvo nadgradila in to je najin način življenja. Smo tudi certificirani čebelarski ponudniki in v okviru tega nudimo poleg medenih doživetij tudi apiterapijo. Imam tudi certifikat za izvajanje medenih masaž, vdihovanje aerosolov iz panja ali preprosto posamezniku nudimo sproščanje v čebelnjaku.
Ko govorimo o čebelarstvu kot panogi in o čebelarjenju in vse, kar je povezano s čebeljami in čebelarstvom, ne moremo mimo občine Žirovnica, kajti eno od temeljiteljev čebelarstva je seveda izhaja iz naših koncev, če temu tako rečem. Gre za Antona Janša in moram reči, da se delovanje, delo in vse, kar je povezano s čebelami, še kako odraža tudi v naši občini.
Slovensko čebelarsko tradicijo zbira, ohranja in predstavlja Čebelarski muzej v Radovljici. Že leta 1929 so slovenski čebelarji dali prvo pobudo zanj, uresničil pa se je potem leta 1959.
Slovenian beekeeping has long been more than merely cultivating bees for honey and wax. It is now a part of farming, tourism and culture. In keeping with the slogan, "No bees, no life," beekeepers strive for natural balance, biodiversity and sustainable development. The UN advanced the recognition of the 20th of May as World Bee Day. The home-sourced bread, butter, honey, milk and apple of the traditional Slovenian breakfast campaign circles the globe with a similar mission statement. Each year it brings joy to the children in Slovenian kindergartens who happily welcome it by singing Čebelar, a song about an old beekeeper by the Lojze Slak Ensemble.
So this is the presentation of Slovenian beekeeping. I believe you all liked it. As many times as I see this film, I think it's really good. I mean, it really shows the situation in Slovenia about beekeeping because it's a kind of national sport or hobby.
Yes.
Really.
Both.
Both. Yes. But let's start with our presentations. The first presentation will be held by Mr. Franz Šivec, who is here with me. He is a forestry engineer, but also many other things. He's one of the most Slovenian renowned beekeepers, and he also believes that bees bring the best out of a man. And so he passes on his knowledge both to Slovenian and to foreign beekeepers. He's a well-known photographer, as you know already, and lecturer, apitherapist, pioneer of beekeeping tourism here in Slovenia, and also an author. So let's hear his presentation of how we care for the well-being of bees and other pollinators in Slovenia.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you on behalf of Slovenian Beekeepers Association, and I wish you a pleasant day. Let me introduce you in few words to Slovenian Beekeepers Association and its current state. In this photo, you can see the headquarters of the Slovenian Beekeepers Association in Lukovica, about 20 kilometers east from our capital, Ljubljana. It consists of 218 local beekeeping societies with around 12,000 members. Given that Slovenia has a population of 2,100,000, it means that there are almost 6 beekeepers per 1,000 inhabitants, which is probably a European record. The Slovenian region is adorned with over 13,000 bee houses, in which there are about 200,000 beehives. These hives are named Alberti-Žnidaršič, which are stacked like dominoes on top of each other in 2 or 3 rows and open from behind. Slovenians are very attached to our bees, and therefore we want them to live in dry, warm hives, protected from cold, heat and bad weather. Even honey from such hives is of better quality than honey in hives that stand alone on the ground. Successful beekeeping has always been based on the knowledge about bees, ingenious beekeeping technique dictated by local nectar and honeydew flow conditions, and especially on the indigenous carniolan bee and its excellent properties, especially its tenderness. This bee lives in Carinthia and Styria in Austria, then in Hungary, Romania, Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Serbia. It was artificially introduced to Germany and many other countries. The carniolan bee is the second most widespread bee in the world, after the Italian one. Beekeepers in Slovenia are allowed to keep only the autochthonous carniolan bee. Crucial to the progress of beekeeping over the last 3 or 4 centuries have been several personalities who have brought their knowledge about beekeeping to simple farmers. Anton Janša, on this picture, an excellent beekeeping theorist and practitioner, and the first teacher of beekeeping at the Vienna Beekeeping School, was one of the outstanding people who spread knowledge about carniolan bees and beekeeping to the wide world. His birthday, May 20, has been chosen as World Bee Day since 2018 at the initiative of Slovenia. Beekeepers enjoy a great reputation among the population. People consider them as important guardians of the environment, and bees are indispensable in maintaining balance in nature. Today, beekeeping is one of the most popular activities in Slovenia. The number of beekeepers is growing by about 300 new beekeepers every year. Children in primary and secondary schools learn about the importance of bees. There are 190 schools with their own bee houses and beekeeping study groups. In winter, the pupils learn about beekeeping theoretically, and in spring practically at their apiary. Currently, about 2,500 pupils attend beekeeping lessons, which is an extremely high number. They are taught by teachers who are also beekeepers themselves, but most of the groups are run by beekeepers from the surrounding area. Experience shows that 1 in 10 of them becomes a beekeeper. It means 10%. But it is essential that all these young people learn about the importance of bees for the environment, which is useful when they get a job and even come to a position where destiny of our environment is decided. For example, in politics. Perhaps it is this general knowledge helped us to have almost no more bee poisoning than we had 10 years ago, or still have in many European countries such as France, Germany, and Italy. With a large increase in the number of beekeepers, and especially with the increase in the number of colonies in the last 10 years, and due to climate change, such as late spring frost, prolonged droughts, and vine breaks in forests, our bees are losing resources of nectar and honeydew flow. 10 years ago, Beekeepers Association of Slovenia took the first step towards improving the situation and proposed to the Ministry of Agriculture that buckwheat should be sown again on a large scale on the land where farmers harvested wheat in July. Buckwheat was once, especially before the arrival of potatoes and corn, widespread throughout Slovenia as a crop from which 2 typical Slovenian dishes can be prepared, bread and porridge. From the 15th century onwards, it often helped to save the population from starvation. Buckwheat was also one of the most important sources of nectar and pollen for bees. It blooms in late August and early September, when most other plants have already finished with flowering. The bees then accumulated a winter food, and often some surplus honey was left for beekeepers. The most important thing was the fact that bee families regenerated with a large number of winter bees and thus successfully survived the winter. In August, our ancestors, centuries ago, transported their colonies to buckwheat fields. For this purpose, special carts were constructed. Today, the colonies are transported by trucks. After 1960, farmers began to use fertilizers, which caused that the buckwheat almost stopped secreting nectar. This also led to poor bee pollination and poorer buckwheat grain yields, which led farmers to abandon buckwheat sowing and prefer to sow corn. In 2010, beekeepers agreed with the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry and Food to subsidize farmers for buckwheat sowing, which has led to an increase in buckwheat sown areas of almost 8 times in the last 10 years. At the same time, we started with a mass promotion of buckwheat products such as buckwheat bread, buckwheat pasta, porridge, pancakes, and etc., because they are healthier than wheat products, especially with a growing number of people with celiac disease. Due to the war in Ukraine and the fact that this country and Russia are the largest exporters of grain, we can expect a shortage of wheat in Europe. Thus, sowing buckwheat is becoming strategically important in today's world. And another aspect we need to mention. Because buckwheat grows quickly and ripens before winter, the soil in our climate gives 2 crops in 1 year instead of 1. At the same time, due to its rapid growth, buckwheat suppresses annual weeds and acts as a kind of natural herbicide. In Slovenia, meadows are still relatively rich in variety of flowers, which provide bees and other pollinators with food for their existence. However, as early mowing is gained ground, which prevents many flowering plants in the grassland from maturing and sowing, our meadows will become only green as they are today in many parts of the developed world. Slovenian beekeepers see an alternative to flowering meadows in our forests, which cover almost 60% of Slovenia. In terms of forest cover, we are in third place in Europe after Finland and Sweden. We are very lucky that 100 years ago, our foresters decided to introduce sustainable forestry with the greatest possible biodiversity. Such forests can provide food to a wide variety of pollinators. This year, Slovenia beekeepers have agreed with foresters for a special campaign. From now on, every last Saturday in March will be dedicated for planting young trees, forest trees. Our goal is to plant in the next 10 years 2 million trees that give food to bees and other pollinators. At the same time, we want this action to become pan-European, as the trees planted will have a major impact on reducing CO2 in the atmosphere and on threatening climate change. Most honey trees will be planted in forests that have suffered a lot of damage in recent years due to windbreaks and icy rain. Foresters will advise which trees belong to certain habitats and at the same time will take care of seedlings in their nursery. We also manage a number of larger companies like Bauhaus to sponsor the purchase of seedlings. The planting will be attended by groups of volunteers such as school children, retired, scouts, students, beekeepers, and others. In Slovenia, the most important for beekeeping are wild cherry, linden, chestnut, maple, spruce, and fir. Among fruit species are apple, plum, pear, and cherry. Preference will be given to those fruit species that are resistant to disease and do not need pesticide treatments. A group of international scientists have predicated that some tree species will lose up to 50% of their current distribution by 2080 because they will not be able to adapt to higher summer temperature and to related longer dry period. The same group of experts believes that acacia or Rubinia will do very well in a changed climate among Slovenian honeys. Acacia, 30% is acacia honey. But in our country and in some other European countries, this tree species is considered invasive, and this is a problem. Most acacia are in Hungary. Most acacias are there. There they began to plant it 300 years ago on vast, dry and barren lands where no other culture thrived. It is no wonder that today Hungarians are the largest exporters of acacia honey in Europe. And in Hungary, acacia honey is considered a national honey, and acacia is a national tree and is protected tree. Half a century ago, Hungarians managed to select such acacias that have straight trunks and are therefore suitable for the wood processing industry. Today, Hungarians are not only the largest exporters of acacia honey in Europe, but also of acacia garden furniture and parquet. Personally, I think that beekeepers should talk to foresters about acacia and suggest them to start planting Hungarian selections on the current habitats of these three species. Thus, acacia will gain more importance for our economy than it has today. Let me present some personal experience in improving nectar flow for our bees. My wife and I have a small farm in the west part of Slovenia, near Italian border, where we have bees and where we grow vegetables and fruits in organic way. In our ground of 10,000 square meters, we planted 40 years ago a large orchard with all kinds of fruit trees. We also designed a park with honey trees, shrubs, and perennials. This is a real beekeeping botanical garden with all important domestic and some foreign honey species. The beauty and diversity of plants on our estate attracts visitors from Slovenia, neighboring and also more distant countries. We share our knowledge and experience with everyone, and at the same time we inspire them to imitate us. This kind of mission brings us a lot of personal satisfaction. Thank you for your attention.
The second presentation will be held by Ms. Valentina Cvetković, head of the Slovene Beekeeping Academy. She will tell us more about the aim of such an institution, which is the spread of extensive, more than 200-year-old knowledge about beekeeping in Slovenia in the form of non-formal educational courses, both in Slovenia and abroad. So please, Valentina.
If you desire wisdom, do like the honeybee. With these words, we would like to address the significance of bees and other pollinators for ensuring food security within sustainable agriculture and their contribution to the biodiversity and to the conservation of the environment. My name is Valentina Cvetković, and I greet all of you most warmly on the behalf of the Beekeeping Academy of Slovenia. In this presentation, I will present the work of the Beekeeping Academy of Slovenia and its projects in connection to good beekeeping practices for sustainable apiculture. Beekeeping Academy of Slovenia was founded in 2018 as an organizational unit of Agricultural Institute of Slovenia. The main purpose is to share knowledge about beekeeping in the form of non-formal educational courses in the national and international context. It also promotes Slovenian educational institution in the field of beekeeping. Slovenia has a centuries-old beekeeping tradition, and all the modern knowledge and findings related to beekeeping are based on this beekeeping heritage. As earlier mentioned, Beekeeping Academy of Slovenia organizes educational courses and programs which are carried by beekeeping instructors who have appropriate knowledge and experience. They are highly qualified and have a positive attitude, ability, and desire to transfer knowledge and skills to those interested in Slovenia and abroad. One of these courses is apitourism. Apitourism is a key segment of the green economy as it significantly promotes the economic efficiency of beekeeping and follows the principles of the strategy for the development of sustainable tourism. Next is queen breeding and selection. Since the queen bee is the focal point of the bee colony, her presence ensures work enthusiasm and the strength of the colony when new eggs begin to hatch. Guidelines for good hygiene habits in beekeeping are based on the principles of the HACCP system and are intended for all beekeepers as an aid and guidance in ensuring safe and quality bee products. Beekeeping with AG hives. This type of hive is the technological specialty of Slovenian beekeeping, and it's usually the home of the Carniolan honeybee. At the turn of the 20th century, the most resounding innovation was provided by the pioneer of the new beekeeping era, Anton Žnidaršič. This type of beehive is operated from behind and it's part of the stack. The combs are placed in the direction of the bee's flight and can be moved like pages in a book. This leaf hive quickly became popular among Slovenian beekeepers and it's still used by more than 90% of beekeepers. Today, AG beehive has spread to other countries. For more detailed information and specifics about the AG hives can be found in the book AG Beekeeping with the Slovenian Hive, written by Dr. Janko Božič, leader of the Beekeeping Center at the University of Ljubljana Biotechnical Faculty. Let's take a look at a short video by the author of the book.
Hello from the urban bee house in Ljubljana Botanical Garden. Here we are keeping AG type of hives to show to people our way of beekeeping. We have opportunity to introduce bees and beekeeping to wider community which are passing by. On the other hand, Slovenian Beekeeping Academy wants to share this technology worldwide. There is quite nice interest abroad, especially overseas in United States and Canada. So we're offering special courses online as well, practical courses in Slovenia. It's also possible to organize visit and do some practical demonstrations at the beekeepers which already have AG hives in US.
For all of you who are interested in this topic, Beekeeping Academy of Slovenia is actually preparing a webinar entitled Current Management of Bee Colonies in AG Hives. The webinar will be held on 27th of May. For more information, please visit our website. You're, of course, all welcome. The next project I would like to present is the pilot project of Bangladesh. The initiative was officially presented at a meeting between the Slovenian state delegation and the BRAC leadership. BRAC was interested in the possibility of developing beekeeping as one of the BRAC's agricultural activities, which, if the project was successful, would be transferred to the level of farmers while creating an integrated value chain. They took a practical approach to planning. Mr. Brane Kuzinc, an instructor, experienced beekeeper and queen bee breeder, was assigned to the field in Bangladesh. The pilot project was successfully completed after 2 years. Actively involved in the project was also Dr. Prešeren, head of the beekeeping group at the Agricultural Institute of Slovenia.
Leta 2018 smo na pobudo bangladeške nevladne organizacije BRAC ter s pomočjo Ministrstva za kmetijstvo, gozdarstvo in prehrano ter podjetja Medex DD začeli z pilotnim projektom razvoja čebelarstva v Bangladešu. BRAC je nevladna organizacija, ki se ukvarja z razvojem podeželja v tretjih državah, z čebelarskim projektom pa so želeli razširiti svoje področje kmetijstva. V 2 letih in pol so bili rezultati toliko zadovoljujoči, da so se v BRAC-u odločili svoje čebelarstvo povečati. Tako so iz začetnih 36 družin dvignili število na 86 in iz začetnega pridelka 140 kg na sedanjih 400 in nekaj kilogramov medu oljčne repice in 700 kg ličijevega medu. Ti rezultati so ohrabrujoči tako za slovensko čebelarstvo, kot za slovensko čebelarsko akademijo in seveda za vse vpletene, ki so pri tem sodelovali. Tem tudi mislim tako na vse slovenske inštruktorje, ki so sodelovali pri samem projektu.
In October 2021, the Slovenian Beekeeping Academy, together with UDAS and ITF, organized educational workshop for beekeepers, victims of mines from all over Bosnia and Herzegovina. Organization UDAS is a non-governmental organization that gathers mine victims and members of their families to exercise their rights and to integrate its members into the community. ITF is a humanitarian non-profit organization established by the government of the Republic of Slovenia with the initial purpose to help Bosnia and Herzegovina in the implementation of the peace agreement and to provide assistance and support in post-conflict rehabilitation. In Banja Luka, 30 beekeepers gathered to listen for 3 days to beekeeping instructors from Slovenia. The aim of the project was to enable mine victims to one day develop small businesses in the field of beekeeping. And above all, an important aspect was the networking of mine victims from all over Bosnia and Herzegovina and their integration into the wider local community. Since beekeeping requires little initial investment, it is one of the great ways to establish a stable household income and improve the quality of life of vulnerable social groups. The realization of the project was made possible by the financial support of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Slovenia. So we now reach the end of the presentation. Here are some contact info. I would like to thank you all for your attention and also to Slovene Ethnographic Museum for organizing this event and giving opportunity to present work of Beekeeping Academy of Slovenia.
Yes, thank you also to you, Valentina, to share this with us. Let me just add that beekeeping provides millions of people with jobs, actually, and it's an important source of farmers' income. And in many parts of the world, as you said, beekeeping may help to empower even, especially women beekeepers and other vulnerable groups. So it's a very good mission that you presented, and thank you very much. And now here is tree beekeeping culture, which is a centuries-long practice of special knowledge, skills, traditions, rituals, and beliefs connected to wild bees breeding in tree hives or log hives preserved in forests of Poland. And it will be presented to us by Ms. Karolina Euhaust. She is a cultural anthropologist and ethnologist and a PhD candidate at the Institute of Anthropology and Ethnology at Adam Mickiewicz University in Poznan, Poland. So let's hear her presentation.
Hello everyone, my name is Karolina Euhaust. Today I would like to present a part of my PhD thesis about multi-species ethnography and heritage studies of tree beekeeping in Poland. Tree beekeeping culture is defined as forest and livestock management consisting in the purposeful and rational breeding of bees and beehives or logs. In my presentation, I would like to say how I use multi-species ethnography and intangible culture heritage studies research in the tree beekeeping. According to lots of ethnologists and researchers, tree beekeeping culture from 17th century beekeeping in Poland became less and less profitable, and it finally died out at the end of the 19th century. And one of publication, author said beekeeping began to be eliminated from government's forest, and the introduced bans for producing new beehives in forest forces tree beekeepers to cut down honey tree and move the hives to logs closer to houses and forest, creating the so-called forest apiary. But even when a tree beekeepers still walk around bees, a new branch of livestock economy was developing, beekeeping, which also contributed to the disappearance of tree beekeeping. The idea of modern apiary promoting box frame hives began to be disseminated, for example, in the Kurpi region, only in the interwar period of the 20th century. Before and after the Second World War, the rural landscape was dominated by apiary consisting mostly of frame hives, next to which bee logs could be seen. At the end of the 20th century, there was a shift of the approach to tree beekeeping in Poland. The breeding of bees in log hives came to be identified with the Polish tradition and heritage. which in turn led to implementation of Project AIM and restoring log, hives, boron, and forest. How it should be, for example, Banashak, one of the first items was the source of the boron forest in the Knishen forest in 1993 and 1994. This forest consisted of 7 inhabited beehives. In 2007, attempts to restore beekeeping were undertaken by the Mazowiecko-Świętokrzyskie Ornithological Society, and in 2006 to 2008 by the World Wildlife Fund. However, these were small-scale initiative only to people who were involved in or passionate about tree beekeeping. A breakthrough came in the following decade through. In 2016, under the UNESCO Convention for the Protection of Intangible Cultural Heritage, tree beekeeping was entered in Poland on the national list of intangible cultural heritage. The main goal of tree beekeeping depositarios was to protect their heritage with the support of UNESCO institution. The entry of tree beekeeping on the national list was the starting point for future activities. Another application for a joint entry of 2 countries, Poland and Belarus. In December 2020, at the 5th session of International Committee for the Protection of the Intangible Cultural Heritage in Paris, the application was accepted with results in tree beekeeping culture being entered on the UNESCO representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity. Currently, various organizations and institutions, as well as private persons, are involved in recreating the tree beekeeping culture. Acting on the assumption of UNESCO Convention on the protection of the habitat culture, the main goal of depositarios of tree beekeeping culture is to protect heritage by transferring tree beekeeping knowledge and skills. To the end, workshops, seminars, a lot of events during with interest parties can learn to modify logs and hang them for colonization by bees. While researching the phenomenon of tree beekeeping culture in Poland, I became interested in the practice of tree beekeepers, which led me in turn to focusing on the issues of transferring knowledge and skills related to this heritage. Tree beekeeping culture is a multifaceted phenomenon that I look at the various dimensions: empirical, social culture, legal, and natural. By conducting ethnographic field research, through participant observation and questionnaires interview, I try to understand what modern tree beekeeping is, what modern tree beekeepers are, and what narratives do tree beekeepers create, and in what social, cultural, and natural practices are they included. I believe that all dimensions are important for understanding and describing tree beekeeping culture. The social culture dimension, characterized by the transfer of knowledge and skill, as well as idea and values of honey hunting culture, affect to spur of human-human relation. My observation indicate that practicing tree beekeeping require from the depositarios a huge biological, natural, and ecological knowledge about the life of the honeybee. In my opinion, knowledge and skills related to tree beekeeping culture or tree beekeeping are knowledge and skills related to the breeding and breeding of bees in forest. My interlocutors, who often have several years or even several decades of beekeeping experience, emphasize that the bees is not an animal whose biology and ecology are fully familiar to them. According to them, it's still a mysterious insect recovered every day. A describable phenomenon among tree beekeepers is to ensure the welfare of the honeybee in such a way that I can live in a given place and as long as possible, free from disease and acting as an important pollinator for plants. I believe that the transfer of tree beekeeping knowledge is a very important issue in the field of intangible cultural heritage protection, but there is also a real need to take into account possible threats resulting from the transfer of this knowledge. My ethnographic research showed that its commercialization in the form of a tourism attraction may pose a threat to tree beekeeping. Bees living in the forest are like invisible actors that play an important role as pollinators. When the life of bees is subject of insistent observation by people who treat tree beekeeping as a tourist attraction, this action may have negative effects such as stings or vandalism, or destruction of the habitat of plants, trees, and honey scrubs around the nesting seeds bees. Therefore, a much more positive aspects of learning about the life of honeybees in forest is nature education and the creation of educational opportunities to which only organized group under the care of the tree beekeeper will have access. The second threat to the tree beekeeping may be the practice of heritage by people who do not know about the breeding of bees in beehives. It may happen that in the thoughts of the temporary passion or fascination, tree beekeeping depositaries will try to bolster their numbers with people who lack professional preparation. As in the case of beekeeping and breeding bees in frame hives, in tree beekeeping, when the bees are looked after by people without knowing about the life of the honeybee. The negative effects of this activity are only just around the corner. And these instance phenomena, such as occurrence of disease among families in beehives, survival of bees during wintering, competitiveness in relation to the food base of honeybees and wild pollinator, generate a negative attitude towards honey bee activities in the local community. This, in turn, may result in undescribable behavior among members of this community, for example, killing bee colony and destroyed beehives, logs, or hives. Another threat to people recreating tree beekeeper are beekeepers who question the correctness of beekeeping by tree beekeepers. Despite the fact that tree beekeeping has been emerging in our country for several years, there is still no legal regulation that could help tree beekeepers in their daily work in the forest. Tree beekeeping activities do not have a legal definition, and its legal aspect related to provision directly regulating beekeeping. It should be remembered that beekeeping consisting of the breeding of bees in frame hives and tree beekeeping consisting of the breeding of bees in the log beehives are not identical in their form. That is why it's so important to pass on knowledge about bee breeding in the forest by tree beekeepers, not by keepers of bees in hives and logs. The benefits that can be brought by tree beekeeping, understood as intangible cultural heritage, are possible thanks to tree beekeepers practicing this type of bee breeding. This span the entire spectrum of beliefs, tradition, and custom on the one hand, and to the other hand, activities that have a real impact on the improvement of forest ecosystem. Understanding the multi-species relationship between tree beekeepers, forest, and bees will become for me the base for gaining new knowledge about the social, culture, and natural dependencies of human and non-human actors. The obtained knowledge can be used to better understand the correlation of global interconnection and the increasingly difficult relationship between humans and nature. In multi-species ethnography, method, I used fieldwork research, of course. I looked on this fieldwork and looked at the species, yeah. Of course, the most important species are bees, but the most important species also are all trees and plants for bees, also other animals, for example, bears, martens, birds. Of course, multi-species ethnography and multi-species ethnography, the most important are hives. Here in tree beekeeping, they are log hives or hives inside the live tree, what we call barć in Poland. Also, the most important is biodiversity heritage or bioheritage and tree beekeeping terminology, so language, yeah. Tree beekeeping, I define in my PhD thesis, I define tree beekeeping as inclusive heritage. Interspecies relations show what cultural phenomenon we are dealing with when we think about honey, when we think about tree beekeeping, yeah. I'm interested in what area is a link between heritage and the forest ecosystem visible, and on what basis, and whether the bees is a fundamental part of it. I also ask on what participants' human-non-human relation are built, negotiated, and implemented. What do these relationships mean for the protection of intangible culture heritage, including non-human entities, yes, bees, and the analysis of heritage. For tree beekeeping, nature and culture consist of what, for example, Anna Tsing called particular places, through which space is created for natural culture as defined by Donna Haraway. To paraphrase Tsing's arguments on the anthropogenic human influence on the human-made forest process, I believe that in the case of tree beekeeping, the bee creates a heritage in the sense that is coexisting with human who give it equal subjectivity. In conclusion, I would like to focus on the base question that I made about this project. My research tried to answer it also and take a discussion about what do we know about nature. Do we know what we're doing with nature? How many roads are completely misunderstanding? And how tree beekeeping practice can tell us more about connection in the nature world and what people do with nature. In my opinion, the humanities as well as the natural science contribute to understanding of social societies, and also pay attention to the transformation of theoretical frameworks and terms of understanding the categories of natural science in the field of humanities. Therefore, in my work, I propose to include bees in the research on intangible cultural heritage, because I understand it as a non-human entity that contributes to this heritage, and not just a passive fragment of it. As a case of the disappearance of manifestation of cultural heritage, I also believe that the problems that we can label urgent regarding environmental issues, for example, climate change, destruction and loss of natural habits of plants and animals, the use of non-nicotinate plant protection products, should be considered on a multi-level basis. Both in the condition of local communities and on a global level. The approach to research on cultural heritage that I propose strength to believe that contemporary tree beekeeping culture should be looked at in various dimensions and manifestation. Thank you for your attention.
Yes, thank you. Carolina, it's really seen from your presentation that such things as tree beekeeping can be very fragile, and it's very, very big question how this will go on. Yes. But now I'm very glad that we have Dr. Michael Rubinick among us. He joined us this moment. He's a director of the Training and Extension Center of the Styrian Beekeeping Association in Graz in Austria. He has a PhD in biology, but he's also a professional beekeeper and an expert who works as an assistant to the local veterinary authority. And I believe he just finished some course with these people. And he teaches queen breeding and biology in professional training programs for beekeepers. And he's also a member of working group Honey, which is an interest group for European farmers. And he will tell us more about his work in this group. He is also an IT expert, and it will be very interesting to hear his analysis of the cooperation between agriculture and beekeeping. So please, Maya, just show us his presentation, please.
Good afternoon. I would like to thank the organizers for the kind invitation and for the opportunity to give a short presentation on the importance of beekeeping for agriculture. My name is Michael Rubinick. I'm the director of the Training and Extension Center of the Styrian Beekeepers Association in Graz, Austria, and a professional beekeeper. Beekeeping in Central Europe has a long tradition. It has been part of rural life for centuries, as indicated by an artifact referred to as honeypot, which is exposed in the archaeological site of Magdalensberg in Carinthia, a settlement inhabited in the 1st century BC up to the half of the 1st century AD. While the exposed honeypot might have served honey hunters rather than beekeepers as a recipient, tending honeybees in hives became an agricultural sideline in the following centuries, as indicated by the combined wooden box skep hive exposed in the ethnological collection of farm buildings in Stübing in Styria. A hive type which in my personal memories has been used up to the 1970s by farmers in eastern Styria. Following important technical innovations, notably in the second half of the 19th century, such as the development of a movable frame hive by the American Langstroth or the honey extractor by the Austrian Ruschka, beekeeping has evolved from a sideline to a professional agricultural activity. Nowadays, according to Chauza and co-workers, it has been estimated that probably around 9% of the currently around 610,000 beekeepers in the EU are considered professional beekeepers. And around 2% own something that we might consider an economically viable bee farm with more than 300 colonies. Agriculture and beekeeping sometimes have conflicting interests, especially when it comes to the application of certain plant protection products that are either not safe for bees or for which risk assessors or risk managers have failed to impose adequate precautionary measures, as was the case with some active ingredients belonging to the group of neonicotinoids some 10 years ago. The truth is that beekeeping and agriculture need each other. There is no sustainable agriculture without beekeeping, and there is no sustainable beekeeping without agriculture. Let's start at the right-hand side of the equation, the beekeeping sector depending on agriculture. The European Food Safety Authority, EFSA, has recently launched a project which I will shortly refer to as the Bee Hub, which is executed by a consortium led by the Brussels-based NGO BeeLife, and in which I am involved as a data manager. The aim of this project is to create a data hub for bees and pollinator-related data. Here, you see the result of an analysis which is based on the data hosted on this platform. It shows a correlation of honey yield in Germany with the area of rapeseed grown in Germany from 1961 to 2018, which is clearly positive. The data was obtained from the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, FAO. This demonstrates how important agricultural crops may be for the profitability of the beekeeping sector. Honeybees are usually kept in stationary hives. In earlier days, those hives were placed in small compounds, as shown in the image on the left-hand side, taken in the vocational school for agriculture and forestry in Graz, Grottenhof, around 1905. Or in the image on the right-hand side, probably taken in the same year on the apiary of Mr. Wimmer in Altaussee, and very north of Styria. In stationary apiaries, beekeepers harvest what nature or agriculture offer in a diameter of 1 to 3 kilometers around the apiary. Given the price of honey, this does, however, not allow for a beekeeping operation to be profitable. Truth is, the profitability of the beekeeping sector depends on agriculture. The problem is that not all regions are suited for the cultivation of particularly efficient nectar-producing crops. This has led beekeepers to move their hives. Migratory beekeeping, as we call it, has always been an important element of the operational organization of professional beekeeping operations. In alpine regions, it was not common practice, but still not entirely uncommon to move beehives to higher elevations to harvest blossom honey, mainly from rhododendron, as shown in the picture on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, horse carts are used to transport hives. The practices shown on those images are obviously far from being economically viable. But as early as in the first decade of the 20th century, with the availability of railway services, the first professional beekeeping operations, like the one owned by Leopold Gompoz from Laafeld, close to Radkersburg, Gornja Radgona, in the south of Styria, transported up to 200 hives, first by horse carts and then by train to distant areas for the exploitation of additional honey sources. This image was kindly provided by his grandson, Mr. Wilfried Gompoz. In this particular case, though, Gompots did not migrate to exploit nectar crops, but precious honeydew honey, which is mainly produced in pine forests in the mountains. After the end of honeydew production, he moved his colonies back to the south of Styria to exploit the nectar produced in buckwheat fields, which provided the necessary feed for the winter months. Nowadays, successful beekeeping operations, such as the Sturm family, based in the western part of Carinthia, who kindly provided the image on the right-hand side, efficiently exploit nectar crops by migrating with hundreds of hives to the highly productive agricultural production zones in the eastern part of Austria to exploit mainly rapeseed in April to May, robinia in May, and sunflower in June and July. On the other side of the equation, we have got agriculture depending to a great extent on beekeeping, namely when it comes to pollination of agricultural crops. Again, data from the Bee Hub showing that the value of animal pollination of agricultural crops in the EU in the past 30 years, from 1991 to 2018, amounted on the average to almost 10% of the value of crop production intended for human consumption. In other words, agricultural products of roughly 15 to 17 billion US dollars per year are produced due to the pollination by animals, most frequently by bees. We conclude, agriculture to be sustainable depends on beekeeping. Not all crops require pollination by animals, and not all of them are of equal economic importance. This graph, obtained from the Bee Hub, shows the average relative economic value of pollination by animals for a range of different crops. Pollination of apples, displayed as blue segment on the upper right side of the circle, accounted for 24% of the total economic value of pollination by animals. Rapeseed, displayed as gray segment on the upper left of the circle, comes second with 13%. Pumpkins and cucumbers, displayed as green segments on the lower left of the circle, come third with a total of 10%. The share of the value of pollination in the total value of crop pollination is of course not the same in all member states. As a result of the type of crops produced and the number of beehives being kept in the single member states, this share is particularly high in countries like Slovenia, Cyprus, Portugal, or Austria, with values of 12 to 15%, while it is low in Northern European countries in which the share of production of cereals and other crops requiring no pollination by animals at all is relatively high. Here we talk about agricultural crops being pollinated by honeybees. As in a productive context, only managed honeybees may provide an efficient pollination of crops. Managed honeybees are usually the only ones being able to withstand the environmental conditions existing in highly productive agricultural areas, and are the only ones that are available in the number necessary for efficient pollination at the required time slot. Nonetheless, farmers in the EU, in contrast to other regions in the world, seldomly pay for this service. The reason for this is that in many member states, policies are being adopted to ensure that honeybees are available at sufficiently high densities to ensure pollination of agricultural crops wherever they are grown. Evaluation of data being hosted on the Bee Hub shows that in countries like Cyprus, Slovenia, Croatia, or Austria, the number of beehives being kept per hectare of crop area that requires pollination by animals ranges between 2.5 and 4.5. Just for comparison, in terms of pollination management, this rate would be considered sufficient for many crops to receive sufficient pollination. I would like to conclude my presentation with the image of a man who was amongst those laying the foundations of modern beekeeping in Styria. He was born to a family of Slovenian farmers in Apace, Abstal, a small village close to Bad Radkersburg, Gornja Radgona, in 1807, in a period in which both Slovenia and Styria were part of the Austrian Empire that has been established only a few years earlier. He, Anton Semlich, became a high-ranking clergyman in Graz. His gravestone can be found in the parish church of Strassgang in Graz, where he died in 1885. He is author of several books on agriculture and beekeeping, which have long been forgotten. But I'm quite sure he, son of a farmer and learned man, understood that agriculture needs beekeeping, just as beekeeping needs agriculture.
Thank you, Michael, for this extremely interesting presentation. We never talk about numbers, actually, so it's really good to face these facts also sometimes. So yes, what's the importance of beekeeping for agriculture? It's quite a substantial part of agriculture that depends on beekeeping. So with this presentation, we concluded the first part, and we have all the speakers here with us. And please, Klaus, I believe there are some questions, and please you take over to see, to moderate this part of our meeting.
Yeah, thank you, Barbara. And first of all, thank you to all the panelists for just really great contributions. And I think we all not only saw that beekeeping is an important topic when it comes to the security of our food security on one hand, but also, and this I found especially interesting, for community building, that connection between heritage and also local traditions to, well, modern needs. We also heard a bit about the aesthetics of beekeeping. I especially liked what we saw in Slovenia, for example, that the kids drawing, and this is something really important, I think. And I also found really interesting that interconnectivity, especially when it comes to, for example, agriculture, but also forests, it is a really broad and at the same time detailed overview we got today. And in fact, we actually got some questions from the floor, and there was one from Caroline Starkey right at the beginning. So there is the question of, are there other European countries that use such large banks of hives? I think to some extent we already saw an answer to that in the last presentation, but maybe this is a question for you, Frank.
Mm-hmm. Kje so še drugi, imajo še hišice? Čebelnjake, ja.
Well, bee houses I see only in Slovenia practically, but centuries ago there were also in Austria, but not only centuries, maybe 50 years ago there were also in Austria, also some in Germany. Now, well, now I can see them in Switzerland, but in German-speaking part of Switzerland, in cantons where German is speaking, there I see similar bee houses as in our country. Maybe there are some differences. We have a special design of our houses, which is different from those in Switzerland. I saw both. Also in Switzerland, I lived there more than 1 year, so I had the opportunity to visit beekeepers, and I saw their bee houses. But in other countries, well, in Germany, they were also in South Germany, but they disappeared. Mainly they disappeared. In other countries, I don't see them.
I think the really interesting fact about Slovenia is that this tradition never stopped. It is a constant tradition, which makes it even more important today to Slovenian culture. There is another question regarding also parasites in a way. The question, one more from Caroline, is also if Asian hornets are a problem for the honeybees in Slovenia, but maybe also in other countries. I think that's a more broad problem. Maybe also other panelists can comment on that.
No. In Slovenia, there is no problem. We haven't. Hornet is not is not here. Is not in Slovenia. We didn't find him, but we know that he's in Italy near Venice. He arrived till Venice, but it means about 130 kilometers from border, Slovenian Italian border. Yes, but there is another problem. Oriental Hornet was found in Trieste last year. This Oriental Hornet is also very dangerous for the bees. Similar as Asian hornet, but this hornet will not survive in hard winter. So we hope that if he comes to Slovenia, he will not survive. So we are not so afraid of this kind of species of this hornet.
Maybe in Austria, you have this problem, Michael?
No, it's a big problem in France, where this Plavidoptuna has first arrived and has established. It's spilled over to Germany, to parts of Germany. It has established in Italy, Liguria, Piemonte, and indeed it arrived till Veneto. But we have no reports yet.
I think
sorry.
Much greater problem is Varroa, and this is why our bees, honeybees can't live without men anymore in our parts.
No. I think we could state that that is actually a global phenomenon. I think there is nobody that doesn't have to cope with the Varroa problem. I was wondering, as there are not any specific questions in the chat anymore, when we try to sum up a bit, and we heard a lot of strategies, possible strategies, how to highlight the importance of beekeeping and the relevance in the 21st century. But once more, I would like to ask the panelists what you think from those you presented are among the best strategies to raise awareness of the importance of beekeeping, of sustainable beekeeping, and the importance for agriculture and so on. What would you say is the best path to follow on for the future?
It is important to guarantee a better pasture for the bees, because we are losing pasture. As I said before, the number of beehives is increasing, but not the surface with the bee plants is the same or even less. We have less. Year from year we lose them. So I think that initiative which we started this year, it means planting trees in the forests. It's a good idea, and this idea must be not only important for Slovenia, but for the whole Europe. And it is also our intention to spread this idea in all countries of the Europe. We know exactly, for example, for Slovenia, which are the most important plants for the bees. And 90% of honey in Slovenia is just from plants, from the trees which are in our forests. So I think this is the most important thing, to guarantee the pasture, the nectar flow and the honeydew flow for the bees.
I think you highlight just the right thing, that it is all about that interconnectivity of things. It's not just putting the bees somewhere and then magic happens. It's a recipe with many ingredients, and every section of basically ensuring our food security can profit from that bees. But I think we have to follow a broad approach to highlight these importances for these different aspects. Are there any more comments from the floor or the panelists on that question I raised?
I will actually just add that without being connected with different sectors, this is impossible, as we saw in different lectures, that just one segment without connecting with others, it's impossible to reach the higher awareness and to improve the situation. I would add just only that. It was really nicely said.
I mean, the lecture today this is also something we see as our duty as AIMA, for example, to bring together people and organizations to talk about topics like this. But because it's just not only science universities, it's the beekeepers themselves in that case, it's the practitioners, it's the museums that can play an important role, as well as the farmers. So bringing all of them together is key, and making it possible for them to exchange knowledge. There is one more question from the floor concerning tree beekeeping. It's from Lauren Muni, and she's saying, I'm very curious about the tree beekeeping in other countries. May I ask why tree beekeeping is not mentioned much? Is this because many other countries cut down many trees in their early modern eras, such as in England? This is a question to all of the panelists who might want to comment on that.
Well,
yes.
if I may
sure.
say something, tree beekeeping, I mean, you also have to consider that beekeeping is an economic activity, and it's for quite a lot of families. It's the basic income. So bees are not only there for leisure activities, but they are an important part of agriculture and of the business model of many people. So you rely on, in fact, you rely on rules, on a set of rules, and these rules comprise also, for example, bee health. There are at European level a lot of laws that deal with bee health, and it's easier to monitor bee health in managed colonies rather than in semi-wild conditions, and this may become a serious threat because, of course, you may spread diseases in this way. So this is one point. We as people who represent also professional beekeepers are not very happy with it.
Yeah, I mean that's these semi-feral sceneries are not only problematic when it comes to regulations. I could also, for example, name the forest grazing with pigs as an example, with the diseases around. So this is also a global issue in this case. There was one comment from Paul Starkey on that tree beekeeping with log hives in trees are pretty common in some African countries. And we also have a question from Carrie Burchill, and she is commenting on the school apiary club. She was very impressed by that, and she's wondering if the schools also have pollinator gardens, and if so, if the Museum of Beekeeping Academy ever participate in outreach visits to the schools or gardens.
This question, I think it's for Mr. Šivec, because this was from the presentation, from his presentation. I can only add that the Academy has, as Dr. Božić said, with this in botanical garden, and it's more for educational purposes, but we are always open, like in Erasmus Plus projects, to involve students for this kind of learning. And now I would like the word to Mr. Šivec to explain more about the high schools and other projects that are involved.
Well, I know very well how are the programs in elementary schools. we wrote about 10 years ago a book with a lot of photographs and other pictures. This book was written for children. And so the children learned from this book, and of course then other things they learn at school. And as I said, in winter we have theoretical lessons, but in spring and at the end of the spring, before the holidays, we work with bees in apiary. It's interesting that in all schools, directors of the schools are satisfied, are very satisfied that we have these courses in the school. But when we wanted to introduce our model to Italy, all the directors of schools were against, they didn't agree with us. They were afraid of bees. So there is I don't know one school where they have an apiary like we have. The beekeepers, yes, they wish to have lessons in schools in Italy, but directors of the schools, they are not satisfied. They don't allow to have the bees. Yes, of course, they are afraid of bees, especially of consequences of bees.
Yeah, but I think that starting with kindergarten and school and even go up to university is really a great concept, and this is something which, well, Slovenia can, among other Eastern European countries, basically be a lighthouse for many other countries across the globe. So when I look in the chat, I don't see any further questions to the panelists, and we're about to, well, we already are 3 minutes over. So I would like to thank everybody for joining in on this lecture, and we as AIMA already work on another one, or a series of more of these kinds of lectures in the future. We're not able to present you a poster yet, but we make sure that we will reach out to you very soon. And thank you very much, Barbara, and all of your team for hosting this great event. It was once more a great chance to learn more about Slovenia and your great culture. So thank you, and hope to see you all soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.